And today I'm reading from The New God Image by Dr. Edward Edinger. This is a letter to Valentine Brook. And Mr. Brook had written a letter to Dr. Jung. And so here is the background. Nothing much is known about Valentine Brook, I think. It's addressed to Worthing, Sussex. And so the first footnote describes the circumstances. On 22 October 1959, the British Broadcasting Corporation broadcast a television interview with Jung conducted by John Freeman in the series Face to Face. In the course of the interview, Freeman asked, "Do you believe in God?" To which Jung answered after a long pause, "I don't need to believe, I know." These words gave rise to considerable argument, and Brook sent Jung a rather derogatory review of the broadcast by Maurice Richardson in the London Observer, dated 25 October 1959, as well as some of the correspondence published in the same paper about Jung's words. Brook asked for their exact meaning. The interview with Freeman is published in C.G. Jung Speaking. Now, some of you who are watching this video may not have had an opportunity to see this video, and it's readily available on YouTube, but I have it set up so that I can add it to this video, and so I'm going to give it to you. It's only a few seconds, but just to give you the flavor of it. And so here are the 20 seconds or so that involve Dr. Jung.
And did you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Do you now believe in God?
Now? Difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
In response to Mr. Brook, who had kindly sent Dr. Jung this negative review, here's the letter to Valentine Brook, dated November 16th, 1959. Dear Sir, as you have learned from Mr. Richardson's account, I am an irritating person. There's some other irritating letters here, but I'm going to save them for later. I am dealing with doubts and views which puzzle the modern mind consciously as well as unconsciously. I am treading on corns right and left. As a consequence, I have to spend a great amount of my time in handing out apologies and explanations for saying things which allude to facts and ideas unknown to the reader. Moreover, the reader is handicapped by his positivistic premise that the truth is simple and can be expressed by one short sentence. Yet nothing is quite true, and even this is not quite true, as Multatuli says. A psychologist concerned with the treatment of mental disturbances is constantly reminded of the fallacies in our verbal formulations. In spite of all the difficulties besetting my way, I will try to explain my standpoint. Whatever I perceive from without or within is a representation or image. A psychic entity caused, as I rightly or wrongly assume, by a corresponding, quote, real, unquote, object. But I have to admit that my subjective image is only grosso modo identical with the object. I guess grosso modo would mean something like in general. But I have to admit that my subjective image is only in general identical with the object. Any portrait painter will agree with this statement, and the physicist will add that what we call colors is really wavelengths. The difference between image and real object shows that the psyche, apperceiving and object, alters by adding and excluding certain details. The image, therefore, is not entirely caused by the object. It is also influenced by certain pre-existent psychic conditions, which we can correct only partially. We cannot remove color perception, for instance. Moreover, we know from experience that all acts of apperception are influenced by pre-existent patterns of perceiving objects, for instance, the premise of causality, particularly obvious in pathological cases, being exaggerations or distortions of so-called normal behavior. They are presuppositions pertaining to the whole of humanity. The history of the human mind offers no end of examples. For instance, folklore, fairy tales, religious symbolism, etc. To explain the spontaneous origin of such parallelisms, the theory of migration is insufficient. I call them archetypes, i.e., instinctual forms of mental functioning. They are not inherited ideas, but mentally expressed instincts, forms, and not contents. They influence our image formation. As experience shows, archetypes are equipped with a specific energy without which they could not have causal effects. Thus, when we try to form an image of the fact one calls God, we depend largely upon innate, pre-existent ways of perceiving, all the more so as it is a perception from within, unaided by the observation of physical facts, which might lend their visible forms to our God image, though there are plenty of cases of the sort. God, therefore, is in the first place a mental image, equipped with instinctual numinosity, i.e., an emotional value bestowing the characteristic autonomy of the effect on the image. This is my chief statement. Now, people unaccustomed to proper thinking assume that it is a final statement. No scientific statement is final. It is a likely formulation of observation and analysis. It goes as far as scientific statement can go, but it does not and cannot say what God is. It only can define what He is in our mind. The mind is neither the world in itself, nor does it reproduce its accurate image. The fact that we have an image of the world does not mean that there is only an image and no world. But this is exactly the argument of those who assume that when I speak of the God image, I mean that God does not exist, as He is only an image. Our images, as a rule, of something, and even delusions are images of something, is modern psychology as amply shown. If, for instance, I imagine an animal which does not exist in reality as we know it, I form the picture of a mythological entity, following the age-old activity of our ancestors in imagining fairy beasts and doctor animals. I am functioning within the frame of an archetype. I am, in this case, strongly influenced by it. The archetype has efficacy. But although we can be fairly certain that no such animal exists in physical reality, there is nevertheless a real cause which has suggested the creation of the dragon. The dragon image is its expression. The God image is the expression of an underlying experience of something which I cannot attain to by intellectual means, that is, by scientific cognition, unless I commit an unwarrantable transgression. When I say that I don't need to believe in God because I know, I mean I know of the existence of God images in general and in particular. I know it is a matter of universal experience, and, Insofar as I am no exception, I know that I have such experience, which I call God. It is the experience of my will over and against, and very often stronger will, crossing my path often with seemingly disastrous results, putting strange ideas into my head, and maneuvering my fate sometimes into most undesirable corners, or giving it unexpected favorable twists, outside my knowledge and my intention. The strange force against or for my conscious tendencies is well known to me. So I say, I know him. But why should you call this something God? I would ask, why not? It has always been called God, an excellent and very suitable name indeed. Who could say in earnest that his fate and life have been the result of his conscious planning alone? Have we a complete picture of the world? Millions of conditions are in reality beyond our control. On innumerable occasions, our lives could have taken an entirely different turn. Individuals who believe they are masters of their fate are, as a rule, the slaves of destiny. A Hitler or Mussolini could believe they were such masterminds. Respes finum. I know what I want, but I am doubtful and hesitant whether the something is of the same opinion or not. Hopefully, I have succeeded in elucidating the puzzle. Sincerely yours, C.G. Jung. Now, I'm going to read one of the footnotes here. Is, in this letter, Dr. Jung had said, to explain the spontaneous origin of such parallelisms, the theory of migration is insufficient. I call them archetypes. Okay, so the point of reading this letter is in part to explain archetypes. So the footnote is to a letter he wrote to an Henri Flournoy on March 29th, 1949. I'm going to read a relevant section of that. He's talking about archetypes in history and notes that they go back to early Greece, Tibet, China, and India. And then he says, my inventiveness consists in nothing but the fact that I believe I have proved that archetypes do not appear only in the migration of symbols, but in the individual unconscious fantasies of everyone without exception. I have furnished proof of this in several large volumes, which unfortunately have not been published in French. As I see it, the idea of a psychic pattern of behavior is not at all astonishing, since the similarity of psychic products was admitted to be a fact even by Freud. He is the honor of having discovered the first archetype, the Oedipus Complex. That is a mythological and psychological motif simultaneously. But obviously it is no more than a single archetype, the one representing the son's relationship to his parents. So there must be others, since there is still the daughter's relationship to the parents' relationship to the children, the relationships between man and woman, brother and sister, etc. Very probably there are also patterns representing the different ages of man, birth, death, etc. There are any number of typical situations, each represented by a certain innate form that forces the individual to function in a specifically human way. These are the same as the forms that force the birds to build their nests in a certain way. Instinct takes a specific form, even in man. That form is the archetype, so named because unconscious thought expresses itself mythologically, for example, Oedipus. I am only continuing what Freud began, and I only regret that the Freudian school have not known how to develop their master's fortunate discovery. What he's saying about archetype is that it is an instinct that comes up in given situations and causes our behavior in certain ways. It's not a nest, but it causes a bird to build a nest in a certain way. For example,